chain. Introduction. Hello over there. Welcome once again to Ecology Perfect Master, the EPM app, your ecology guide. My goal here is to help you get more acquainted with how your environment operates so you can appreciate it more and take better care of it. In the light of that, today's lesson is food chain. Enjoy it. A food chain explains which organisms eat another organism in the environment. The food chain is a linear sequence of organisms where nutrients and energy are transferred from one organism to another. This occurs when one organism consumes another organism. It begins with the producer's organism, follow the chain, and ends with the decomposer organisms. At the end of the class, you should be able to list 4 major parts of the food chain. Then define and describe the 2 types of food chain, and list food and explain relationship that exist among the living things. We have a keywords to be food chain. The sun is the ultimate source of energy on earth. It provides the energy required for all plant life. The plants utilize this energy for the process of photosynthesis, which is used to synthesize their food. During this biological process, light energy is converted into chemical energy and it's passed on through successive trophic levels. The flow of energy from a producer to a consumer and eventually to an apex predator or a detritus is called the food chain. Dead and decaying matter, along with organic debris, is broken down into its constituency by scavengers. The reducer, that is the decomposer, then absorb this constituency. After gaining the energy, the reducer liberates molecules into the environment, which can be utilized again by the producer. Take a close look at the cycle as represented in the diagram below. See. The grasshopper eats the plant. The mouse eats the grasshopper. The snake eats the mouse. The eagle eats the snake. When the eagle dies, the fungi break the body and turn them into nutrients. Organisms which produce biomass by capturing the energy from sunlight are called producers. And at the beginning of every food chain, organisms which feed on a producer are called primary producers and will also be herbivores. The next organisms in the food chain is secondary consumer, which can be eaten by tertiary consumer. A predator is an animal which hunts and kills other animals, and prey are the animals that are hunted and eaten. Food chains are always written starting with the producer and followed by the primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. The arrows always pointed from the organism being eaten to the organisms which feed on it. You see? A food chain showing how green leaves, the producer, harness the energy from sunlight and converts it into biomass, which passes along the rest of the food chain. The beetle eats leaves, so is a primary producer and is itself eaten by birds, which is the secondary consumer. The snake is the tertiary consumer since it eats birds. Example in terrestrial habitats are grass grasshopper, domestic fowl hawk. Producer, primary producer, consumer, tertiary consumer, grass antelope lion, producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. Example in aquatic habitats are dartle, mosquito larva, toad whale. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. We have humus, earthworm, domestic fowl, and man. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Note: producers in aquatic habitats are referred to as the phytoplankton. The arrow shows the direction in which the food is being transported. Food chain is relatively short because of energy lost at tropic level. The food chain consists of 4 major parts, namely the sun. The sun is the initial source of energy, which produces energy for everything on the planet. Producers. The producers in the food chain includes all autotrophs, such as phytoplankton, cyanobacteria, algae, and green plants. This is the first stage in the food chain. The producer make up the first level of food chain. The producer utilizes the energy from the sun to make food. Producers are also known as autotrophs. As they make their own food, producers are any plants or other organisms that produce their own nutrients through photosynthesis. We also have consumer. Consumers are all organisms that are dependent on plants or other organisms for food. This is the largest part of a food web, as it contains almost all living organisms. It includes herbivores, which are animals that eat plants, carnivores, which are animals that eat other animals, parasites that live on other organisms by harming them, and lastly, the scavengers, which are animals that eat dead animals' carcass. Here, herbivores are known as primary consumers and carnivores are secondary consumers. The second trophic level includes organisms that eat producer. Therefore, primary consumers or herbivores are organisms in the second trophic level. Decomposers. Decomposers are organisms that get energy from dead or waste organic material. This is the last stage in the food chain. Decomposers are an integral part of a food chain as they convert organic waste material into inorganic materials which enrich the soil or land with nutrients. Types of food chain. There are 2 types of food chain, namely detritus food chain and grazing food chain. Let's look at them more closely. Detritus food chain. The detritus food chain includes different species of organisms and plants like algae, bacteria, fungi, mites, insects, worms, and so on like that. The detritus food chain begins with dead organic material. The food energy passes into the decomposers and detritivores, which are further eaten by small organisms like carnivores. Carnivores, like maggots, become a meal for bigger carnivores like frog, snakes, and so on. Primary consumers, like fungi, bacteria, protozoa, and so on, are detritivores, which feed on detritus. Grazing food chain. The grazing food chain is a type of food chain that starts with green plants, passes through herbivores and then to carnivores. In a grazing food chain, energy in the lowest trophic level is acquired from photosynthesis. In this type of food chain, the first energy transfer is from plants to herbivores. This type of food chain depends on the flow of energy from autotrophs to herbivores, as autotrophs are the best for all ecosystems on Earth. The majority of ecosystems in the environment follow this kind of chain. Through today's lesson, you've learned that the food chain consists of 4 major parts. Namely, we have the sun, the producer, consumers, and decomposers. The 2 types of food chain are detritus and grazing food chain. Understanding food chain is vital as they explain the intimate relationships in an ecosystem. A food chain shows us how energy living organisms is dependent on other organisms for survival. The food chain explains the parts of energy flow inside an ecosystem. Attempt this quick test. What is the ultimate source of energy on Earth? Illustrate the food relationship that exists among living things. List the 2 types of food chain. State 4 parts of food chain. That's the end of our today's class. Stay blessed.